Hi, I'm Craig Bennett with the Craig Bennett Group at My Home Group Real Estate. Welcome to my podcast. Are you curious about what to do when buying a home? Well, today I'm speaking with one of my lender partners who's going to talk about that. So without any further ado, Brandon Bialkowski, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Craig. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
So I grew up in Arizona since I was probably 12 years old. My parents have been in the real estate business and mortgage business for a long time now. I was pre-dental, so I was planning on going to dental school. My parents were like, jump in while you're applying to dental schools and all that stuff, and hopped in the mortgage business, and here I am today. We started a team called the Brava team. We're Scottsdale located, so we have an office in Old Town Scottsdale. We also have one in North Scottsdale, with our primary hub being just north of Kierland. Started the team about 4 years ago, and have just grown from there.
Great. How many people are on your team?
So right now we have 5 people. It's myself and my business partner, Vanessa, and then we have someone that works kind of contract to close stuff with us. We have marketing person who's kind of a contractor at this point, and then we have a loan officer that we're kind of bringing up in the ranks.
Great, awesome. So, it's speaking about lending and the whole mortgage industry, let's just start in the beginning. What type of clients do you work with?
So it's awesome for us because we work with a full scope of clients. We work with first-time home buyers. We work with investors. We work with people purchasing second homes. That's huge out here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So we see kind of the full scope of everything, and every client's needs going to be a little bit different in how we approach their financial portfolio. A first-time home buyer is going to need a little bit more hand-holding, which I personally like the most is working with first-time home buyers. Investors are obviously going to be more numbers-based, so it just depends on the wants and needs of the client, but we work with everybody.
Right. Good. Yeah, I get that. I love working with first-time home buyers as well, and do a lot of investor work also. So looking forward into next year, let's just kind of talk about rates, because that's always on everybody's mind, right, when they're shopping for a home and a mortgage. Where do you see rates heading?
So just kind of a little backstory on rates and kind of how they got to where they were. When COVID hit, the Fed determined that they were going to purchase mortgage-backed securities and treasuries to essentially keep rates artificially low. They've done that up until they have announced that they're going to start tapering the purchasing of these mortgage-backed securities and treasuries in November and kind of taper them off through the end of the year into next year. Now, what that does, and when they're buying these mortgage-backed securities, is when the pricing goes up on these mortgage-backed securities, which they're buying, so the price goes up, obviously supply and demand, rates go down. So we saw ultra low rates in 2020 and into 2021. Now, with them tapering, inflation's going to start to take over and rates are going to go up. So what we're kind of predicting, and what a lot of the experts are analyzing, is that rates are already starting to creep up now. I believe you can still get into the high 2s with some loan programs into the low 3s, obviously dependent upon credit, but kind of where they're marking everything to be by Q3 of 2022 is probably right around 3.6%. So it's not going to be a huge substantial increase. It's going to be more gradual, obviously with ebbs and flows in the market, but ultra low rates from a historical level.
From a historical, historically low levels. Really. Yeah.
And now we see clients with rates. They see rates in the 3s, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?"
Yeah.
But it's still, the buying power is still there. It's going to be there into 2022. The demand isn't. We're not going to see a huge shortage or fall off in demand because rates are starting to creep up. I think if they get past the 4% level, that's when some of the buying power of the first-time home buyers is going to go away, and we're going to see some of that demand fall off. But with rates still in the mid to low 3s, you're not going to see a ton of fall off with that.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I don't want to date myself, but my first mortgage was 11% on an ARM.
Crazy.
So.
Was I born yet then?
Probably not. So yeah, a little crazy. So these rates are totally historically low and just, amazing, even if they get into the 4s at some point in the future. But in the 3s, it's historically low rates and a great opportunity. So you kind of mentioned COVID restrictions and the Fed and all that. So were there any mortgage guideline restrictions during COVID, and how these changed up to today? Like, where are we at today with the COVID mortgage restrictions?
So we were super restricted when COVID first happened because you have to think people were losing their jobs left and right. So we had to institute a ton of different guidelines, not us specifically as like a mortgage loan originator, but the controller, so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, all kind of instituted what are called overlays to their actual guidelines. So things like commission income, if people were receiving bonuses, even year-end bonuses, a lot of times we weren't able to use that because we weren't sure what was happening during that time. So a lot of people furloughed, and coming back to work, we had to kind of deal with that as well. As we're kind of coming out of this, we're seeing guidelines come back to normal, although the people being still really, really hurt are the self-employed borrowers. So we're seeing a ton more restriction. They're looking at business bank accounts. They're analyzing all of that stuff, P&Ls, things that we just simply weren't doing before, instead of just looking at last year's tax returns or 2 years ago. There's a lot more regulation into what we're looking at, and that's still true today.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's difficult for us, especially when we're pre-qualifying a self-employed borrower, because you don't know, they could have a bad month and then they can take that month into account on their business bank statement. It's just very difficult.
Yeah, I get that. I want to go back a bit to the beginning of our conversation, talking about the types of clients you work with. And so let's talk about the first-time home buyer, because you mentioned that, and we both like working with first-time home buyers. It's very rewarding to get someone into their first home. You have a first-time home buyer. Tell me how that person should prepare to meet with you. I mean, you're going to get a loan, buy a house, get a mortgage. What's a good first couple steps somebody should take in that process? Yeah.
So most first-time home buyers that come to me are generally scared of their finances and don't know kind of where to start. So I'm a millennial myself, and a lot of my friends are now purchasing homes. So they'll come to me and have zero idea. We don't learn anything about purchasing a home when we grow up. So they don't know anything about what credit score minimums are, how much they should have saved for down payment, which is a huge misconception. All of those things. And generally what I do is we look at the broad scope of everything. So we have them fill out a full application. We get all of their documentation, and if they need credit help, if that's one of the reasons why they haven't purchased a home, if they don't have down payment, there's programs out there. So it's just every client is going to be a little bit different, and that's why we like it. It's a little bit more challenging when somebody doesn't have 20% down, but with the programs that are out there now and readily available, it's a lot easier. So we take more of, I guess, a full scope approach, and where we're looking at their finances and their goals in the future, not just this purchase, but if they want to rent this house out and then purchase another home in the future. It's just every client's a little bit different. And that's why I like working with the first time home buyers.
Yeah, and what I appreciate working with you on that is that a lot of my clients, they may not be ready today, right? But they need a game plan. They need to understand, like, if they want to buy in 6 months, let's say, what do they need to do now to prepare to be able to buy a home in 6 months? So when you have that conversation with them and you look at their finances, you can tee them up for 6 months, a year out.
Exactly.
And what I appreciate is that you actually take that time with those clients to get them to that place instead of just looking for a sale today. You're actually building that relationship, guiding them through the process, and setting up that roadmap really to home ownership.
Exactly. And coming up with a solid game plan is even if you're a year out, that's what we try and do, because we can game plan for credit challenges. We can get you in credit repair. We can come up with ways to save money, whether that's a 401k loan. There's different ways. There's down payment assistance programs. So there's ways to structure it. And if we have the ability to look at the financials up front, even if you're a year out, you'll feel more than ready at that year period.
Right. Yeah, I think that alleviates a lot of that fear you talked about. If people, when they start to think about home ownership, have that conversation with you, get comfortable with the terminology, what they have to do, and then when they're ready in 6 months, a year, they're not quite as fearful of the process.
It's better for us to get like an idea 6 months out than scrambling a month out, and then we have credit challenges that we have to work on. Right. So I say the sooner the better.
Yeah, good. Speaking of that, just kind of looking at some of my notes here, but what advice would you give someone's looking to buy a home in the future, a year or so out? But here's a common question I get. I'm going to sell my home now. I'm going to rent or do something. I want to buy in a year. What strategies should they employ to make sure they're positioned to buy? And do you think that's a good idea? Like, I'm always like, why are you waiting? Like, the market's great now. Like, we don't know if it's going to keep going up, flat, or what. So like today's a known factor, a year is not. So that's always my approach. But do you get a lot of that? The buy sell their home and then rent?
Yeah, so we do see some of that, especially with the fear of having the contingent offer. That's the biggest thing. No one wants a contingent offer right now. So we're seeing a lot of challenges in that. I don't necessarily, it depends on the client, but I don't necessarily love that idea per se. There's different ways around it, especially because we do service a lot of our loans. If they have the ability to qualify for both with a minimum down, they can take a large chunk on the sale of their home, because we're seeing, record appreciation growth, and take that and then get the payment that they wanted in the future. So as long as they can qualify and there's kind of a means to the end, they're not necessarily having to wait a full year, in which experts are predicting another large substantial appreciation.
Right. So yeah, I totally get that. That's always been my position as well. Let's just figure out how to carry both. Do
it's essentially kind of like a bridge loan.
A bridge loan, yeah. Possible bridge loan or that type of thing.
They have bridge loans out there. They're not great from a terms perspective.
Right.
There's different ways around them now, with servicers having more capability in using the funds after closing that I think are a better solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So good. Yeah. Because I get that a lot. People are like, well, I'll just rent, but I want to sell it to get current appreciation. But then you're kind of spending money on rent. You're spending your equity, basically.
Exactly. You're spending and then you're moving twice. It's
costly.
It's a very costly, short-term solution to where you're trying to get.
Because we're in this kind of unprecedented seller's market, any tips for first-time home buyers in this market?
So I think solidifying your pre-approval is going to be key. And what I mean by that is when you walk into, let's just say, a Chase Bank, and I'm not calling Chase Bank out, the majority of these banks do this. Yeah. They pull your credit and they say, okay, here's what do you make, and you're pre-approved for this amount. Well, when you, as an experienced listing agent, see an offer from a Chase Bank, or they see an offer from someone that gets all of the documentation up front, calls you upon writing the offer, goes through the financials, makes sure that everything is solid, it's a lot different for them, and it's a lot different of an experience that they're going to receive on the seller side. Although it is very hard right now, especially kind of in that first-time home buyer price point. But any chance that you can get to get a leg up on the other first-time home buyers is going to be key, because we still have a ton of investors. We have like the BlackRocks coming in and purchasing all of these single-family homes for rental. So it is a very tricky market, but doing everything that you possibly can within your power to make sure that your offer is as solid as you can, I think that's the best.
Absolutely, bet. Yeah. What Brandon was speaking to, for those of you that don't know, the current market, there's a lot of institutional investors buying, like BlackRock, these hedge funds that are coming in with a lot of money and buying homes throughout the valley and competing with our first-time home buyers. Really.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer that's going to last, because a lot of these large investors have already solidified their portfolio.
Right. Yeah, so that's good. So kind of going back to the rate conversation, what's happening with the refinance market?
So we're seeing a slowdown. Obviously, I would say February of 2020 was going to be your best rate market as far as lowest terms. We did a good job of getting the majority of our clients refinanced. We keep a good track of our database. We're constantly monitoring that. So the majority of clients and majority of people have refinanced into a lower rate. What we're seeing a lot more of now is cash out, because the Phoenix market, 33% on average year-over-year appreciation. People are now cashing out when they don't want to move. They can take that equity, redo their homes. Although contractors are expensive right now, it's not necessarily a great solution right now. But that's what we're seeing a lot of, is the cash out refinance market is huge. We're still seeing some clients refinance that haven't before, but it's slowed down quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, rates are going up, so that would change a little bit. I work a lot with investors. I know you do too as well. Tell me about the portfolio products designed specifically for investors at Caliber.
So we were acquired by NewRez, which is a REIT, about 3 months ago. So they came with a different array of products that they're actually going to be rolling out to correspondent in different channels as well. One of them specifically, I think, is great for investors, especially people that have a ton of properties. They want to close in an LLC. As you know, it's almost near impossible to close an LLC conventionally. They basically look at, it's a portfolio product that looks at cash flow only on the property. So they take what your mortgage payment is going to be, and they take what's deemed as market rent for that property. If it's over 120%, they're going to lend on that. They don't take a look at income, assets, credit, any of that stuff really. It's more so geared exactly towards that property. You can close in an LLC. So it's a niche product that I think is going to be pretty big for investors, because we see a lot of that self-employed where they're trying to get 10 to 15 properties. It just makes it much easier from both a documentation standpoint as well as ease on us.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Good. So, Brandon, I really appreciate your time in this morning. Talk about the current financial industry for real estate. Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we sign off about the market?
I mean, I still think it's a great market to buy, and I'm sure that you would.
I as well.
Yeah, it's a great market to buy. We do have a lot of frustrated buyers. I don't think the forbearance is going to be a huge issue in kind of the foreclosure wave that we're assuming. I just saw a statistic today. I think it's 1.3 million homeowners are in forbearance right now across the nation. Right. So even if that, I mean, if you just categorize out in Arizona, we're not going to see a huge wave. So I think some of the demand will fall off, as I was mentioning, not a ton with the rates going up, but it's going to be like this, I believe, for the foreseeable future, especially in the Arizona market. Especially
in Arizona, one of the things that I think is really driving this is our is the cities in Arizona, the metro area. They've been such a great job of attracting businesses. What we haven't done is increase our housing stock, right? So we're in this complete supply-demand issue. Yep. So once the supply catches up, which is going to be a long time, you just don't create supply of housing overnight, right? So it's going to take a while.
Yeah, and not to mention too, the builders are struggling to build in the time frame that they need. Yes. So it's taking some builders 12 to 14, even 16 months to build a home, where it should take 8 to 9. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And getting supplies, we're in that supply chain issue as well. Exactly. Good. Well, again, thank you very much for coming in today. I appreciate it. Awesome, Craig. Thanks for having me on. Absolutely. It's always good talking to you. You too. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I look forward to speaking with all of you on a future podcast of the Craig Bennett Real Estate Group at My Home Group Real Estate. Thank you.